What's going on, guys? No checking in. Yet another video with author, counselor, depression survivor, good friend, spiritual advisor, Douglas Bloch. Douglas, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, everybody.
We are continuing a series that you guys have seen in this channel. I've been featuring Doug for years now on this channel. He is invaluable to me. He can be to you as well. Today we're going to talk about taming the inner critic. If you're anything like me, when you're down, when you're depressed, when life ails you, sometimes you can become negatively and overly critical of yourself in a way that doesn't help.
Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and a depression survivor. Welcome to another edition of One-on-One with a Depression Counselor. Once again, my mentor and friend and video advisor, Noah Thomas, is here to conduct an interview and talk about another gem that we could all use in healing from depression.
Taming the inner critic.
Taming the inner critic, a big thing with people in recovery from depression, addiction, and just in recovery from life.
What are some of the things that the inner critic says?
Oh, I wrote down some beautiful things. Comparing yourself to others' achievements and abilities. Oh my God, yes. Why can't you be more like your brother? I used to, when I was depressed, well, look at my friends. They're making millions of dollars. I'm sitting in here in a hospital. What's wrong with me, right?
Sure.
Keeping track of your failures, but never reminding you of anything you did well. Calling you names like stupid or incompetent or weak or selfish or defective. I remember my mother used to say, God bless her, you were just born sick. Ooh, that just sounds horrible.
It's horrible.
Blaming yourself for things that go wrong. And setting impossible standards of perfection. We all know people who are perfectionists, like ourselves, right? And if you don't meet that thing perfectly, then you're a loser. So I mean, it's a hard taskmaster.
It really is a hard task to master. I think it's something that's difficult for people that aren't depressed. I think for people that are depressed or anxious, it becomes that much more difficult.
I think there's a lot of people with anxiety. I think we really need to talk about the fact that people with OCD and I think people who are always trying to strive to do something perfectly have more anxiety than depression.
Sure.
So my channel is really about depression and anxiety, and so is yours.
Right.
We've both dealt with both. They're like a twin-headed monster.
Absolutely.
And you and I have both suffered from agitated depression.
Comorbid.
So we have to deal with both. Comorbid, 80% comorbid, right?
Yeah.
All
right, let's keep it going. Where does the inner critic come from?
The inner critic usually comes from some internalized parental or authority figure that put us down when we were a child. The psychologists say that 70 to 75% of the messages we get from parents and authority figures are negative, unfortunately. And now the problem is that when a person is young, before the age of 7, they don't have that filter, that rational mind filter. They can say, oh, this is bunk. They just take in everything and absorb it like a sponge.
Sure.
Maria Montessori used to say people have the absorbent mind. This is why the Catholic Church used to say, give us a child before he is the age of 7 and he is ours for life.
Oh,
that early programming is really deep.
Sure.
Now, once you go beyond 7, that stuff is in there, and you don't need the parents or the authority figures to give you the program. You're now reinforcing it.
Right.
You're the one who's keeping it up.
Right.
So the bad news is that you're on automatic pilot. The good news is because you're the one doing it, you're the one who can stop it.
Sure.
Examples. Well,
how does the inner critic impact you?
Well, again, for me, when I was depressed and I kept comparing myself to other people who graduated from school with me, I was just as smart as they were. I was just as motivated, but they were, making things in the world and I wasn't. So I just beat myself up because I couldn't do what they were doing.
Sure.
But I forgot to remind myself that I have a brain disorder that they don't. It's like saying, well, you only have one leg, you should be able to run as fast as someone with 2.
Right.
And because depression is invisible, we don't think of ourselves as having a disability or being under some sort of, we're not disabled people. We have a disability, and we have to just remind ourselves that that's there, and it wasn't our fault. So don't blame yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's like reading or hearing my own thoughts. I think if I could reiterate anything, I would probably just say something along the lines of when I was depressed, I judged myself when comparing myself to people
Absolutely.
that seemingly were not depressed, and I think it kept me in a place of constant depression and made it harder for me to take the steps necessary to heal because I saw other people living and behaving in a certain way and thought I should be able just to do that, and it took more of like the acceptance that I had a condition and I was going to have to be more forgiving of myself and
Absolutely.
not so critical.
Yeah.
So that's a really great topic. It's something I think I imagine everybody has been too critical of themselves from time to time. So how can we reverse this process?
Well, in my book and on the website, I outline a 3-step process. The first is to become aware that the critic exists, and it helps to name the critic. So I'm going to read to you some of the things my clients like yourself have the names they've given.
Sure.
Bully, critic, judge, Mr. and Mrs. Perfect, parent's name, Mr. Kick-Ass, Hard-Ass. Just, give it some name so
Sure.
you can personify it. And then pay attention to your self-talk. And when you start to feel bad about yourself, oh, that must be the inner critic calling,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I must be putting myself down. Why do I feel so crappy?
Right.
And you might hear something like, again, oh, you can't make it, or why is Johnny doing better than you?
Of course.
And then the third thing to do is, of course, in cognitive therapy, take the negative voice and replace it immediately with something positive.
Right.
I am doing the best I can. It really wasn't my fault I'm depressed. I'm a courageous person facing a difficult condition. So, and also before that, I need to remember, so the first thing you do is you say shut up or cancel.
Absolutely.
First you negate the negative voice, and then you replace it with a positive. So first, hey, stop that. No, it's not true. And then you replace it with what is true.
If I might interject here, something that has been said of me by doctors and therapists in the past is that I am more negative or overly critical towards myself more than I realize. So I think it's important to be perceptive of the idea that maybe you are being overly critical. Because for me, for the longest time, I didn't realize I was being so hard on myself, or that it was so self-defeating to do so. And once that was an identified thing, it made it a little easier to start challenging.
Absolutely.
So, but that was just me. I kind of was in denial about how negative.
Now, again, people who are depressed tend to blame themselves more than they should.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some examples of ways to tame the inner critic?
Well, I gave you that 3-step process.
Right.
Here's a couple of other ways. You actually mentioned one of them, the whole idea of self-acceptance and forgiveness.
Sure.
We have to do a video on acceptance. It is so big. You have to realize that, hey, I accept myself the way I am with my limitations, and I am really doing the best I can, and it's not my fault that I'm in this pickle.
Of course.
The other thing is that sometimes medications can be very helpful, especially to quiet down the negative voices. And then, of course, there's psychotherapy and counseling. In other words, what I'm saying is that you can't just use affirmations or positive self-talk.
Sometimes really you need pro help.
Well, especially if it comes to family of origin issues, abuse, neglect.
Right.
Really hard stuff. You need again the ally, this time the therapist, to help you sort through that. And you need to be reparented, and that's what therapy can really do for people, is reparenting. Hey, you now have the therapist that is a loving voice of unconditional love and acceptance you never got as a kid.
Right.
So again, reach out for support, call in the troops when you need help, and that will make these tools much more effective. So you are deserving of love. The inner critic is wrong. It's false. Pay no attention to it. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. They said in the Wizard of Oz, right?
Of course.
That is the inner critic. He is a mirage. He is an illusion. Your basic nature is good and whole and perfect and loving, and don't let anybody, including yourself, tell you any differently.
That was beautifully put, and I think if I could add one little caveat that comes to mind for me, is I think for some people it's really hard to admit that maybe you do need that extra level of help and care, or that there is some retooling to do. And I just encourage everyone, if you have the capacity, to allow yourself that extra help, and don't see it as a sign of weakness, but rather as one of the strongest things you could ever do for yourself is admit you need it.
When I wrote a book on affirmations for kids, and I did a lot of research in 3 years, I found out that the number one trait that helped children who had been abused survive was the ability to reach out for help. The kids who basically broke through the wall of silence and reached out, and violated the parent rule of don't talk, don't tell.
Sure.
They were the ones who made it out there. So it's just like you came to my group. If you hadn't come to the group, you might not be here today. And that wasn't about my group. That was about your willingness to get help and to admit you needed it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome.